Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sunny Go One Piece podcast. On this episode, we're going to be diving into episodes 668 through 670, which will cover manga chapters 736 through a slight portion of 738. So this really only covers about 2 chapters, and you'll see why. This is pretty much the point in my original run of watching the anime where I decided to stop watching week to week because the filler and pacing had become so bad that even I, a longtime diehard fan, got frustrated at how bad the anime was adapting Dressrosa. I essentially committed myself to just letting the anime play out until the arc ended, and I decided that I would binge it all in one go and skip through things that I deemed unnecessary or a waste of time. I did, however, still keep up when certain moments would happen in the anime and tune in to see very specific major events that I did want to see animated without having to wait. And when those episodes aired, I did tune in to see those, but on the whole, I did not watch the episodes week to week anymore for this portion of the anime. But I mean, it is brutal from here on out, as the animation quality also seems to take a nosedive as well. So it wasn't even pretty to look at, let alone enjoyable to follow the story anymore. And I also highly recommend that at this point you're better off just reading the manga. The anime is just atrociously bad in Dressrosa. It makes the experience way worse, and I think the popularity of Dressrosa is also hurt too, and the perception of it because of this fact. Because Dressrosa on the whole is a great arc, because it's a shame. I really like Dressrosa in the manga, so I was looking forward to seeing it in the anime, but good God, it's so bad. And going back and rewatching it for this podcast is still really rough. As you'll see in a little bit, the differences section is just massive compared to any other episode I've done thus far. But yeah, we'll get into that. But anyways, let's get into the synopsis. So, with the final round of the Corrida Colosseum beginning, as the fight for the Mera Mera no Mi has started while the Straw Hats and their allies work together to complete their various objectives, with Frankie taking on Senor Pink, Usopp and Robin working to take out Sugar and Treble, while Luffy, Zoro, and Viola have to find a way to Doflamingo while contending with the Don Quixote family's latest revealed executive member, Pika. Alright, so as I alluded to, this differences section is massive. In fact, I would say the majority of these episodes are filler. So first off, each fighter in the Corrida Colosseum gets an introduction from Gats, the announcer, but in the manga, it just starts with Diamante's intro, and in the anime, he gets his own sort of rock musical number, likely referencing his Steven Tyler inspiration and his sort of rock background. Next, in the manga, Bartolomeo kind of badmouths the audience after entering the arena. In the anime, he just doesn't say anything, which I thought was a weird change. It's not necessarily added filler, but it's an odd change. Another one is at the beginning of episode 669, there's an added scene not in the manga where we see Kinemon and Wicca splitting off from the trio of Luffy, Zoro, and Viola after they defeat the initial wave of soldiers. In the manga, we don't even see them again until they encounter Pika for the first time, but by then Kinemon is missing from the group with no real explanation till later. The filler scenes like this, I have no problem with, because they do explain things that Oda was otherwise unable to include due to time and page constraints, but are somewhat necessary because it does stand out how Kinemon is all of a sudden just missing when they do encounter Pika. And so, yeah, you're left wondering, well, I wonder where Kinemon went. And you just kind of assume that he split off from the group, and then he'll just show up. I think it takes about 8 or 9 chapters for Kinemon to actually show back up. There's an added scene in between the Pika encounter where it cuts back to the Senor Pink versus Frankie fight, as we see the Marines trying to take down Frankie in this sort of long drawn out scene that's completely filler, which this type of filler scene I'm not a fan of, as it really does just exist to waste time and even kind of goes against Senor Pink's character, as he would definitely not allow this kind of intrusion to such a hard-boiled fight. Also, in this sort of same realm, we see Dellinger actually arrive at this point as well, which we do not see in the manga. He does eventually show up, but not right here. Also, the sequencing of the scenes is altered quite a bit as well, Between the encounter with Pika and the scene where Cavendish gets transformed, there's a scene that's that's moved to later. And in the manga, there's more scenes that show what's happening in the Corrida Colosseum as well. There's an added filler scene in the anime just before Leo sets out to plant the Tabasco grape, where Usopp is seen freaking about the scariness of the executive members of the Don Quixote family, with Treble shooting the fly out of the air with his incredible snot force. That part where Treble shoots down the fly is in the manga, but pretty much everything prior to that, with Usopp and him freaking out leading up to that, is all filler. In the Corrida tournament, when the fighting fish with the chest on its back appears for the first time, in the anime they expanded on this scene by adding more fish that attack everyone, whereas in the manga it's just that number one fish with the chest on its back that attacks Rebecca, and that's the only thing we see. Next, after Sabo and Burgess have their initial clash, there's an added moment with Rebecca where she's seen shaking and doubting herself after seeing just how strong Sabo and Burgess are. This isn't in the manga, and I kind of hate that they added this bit of weakness to Rebecca that there wasn't in the manga. I mean, we know she's far weaker than all of them, and I'm sure she's feeling that same feeling, but there's no reason to give her this sort of mental weakness, and I hate that it kind of lessens her character's resolve. Another strange change is that when Lao Ji swats Kabu, in the manga it's shown in real time. However, the anime opts to show it once in full speed in real time, then it goes back and has Lao Ji explain what happens in slow motion, which I don't understand why this was changed other than to, again, waste more time. Another one is when Pika tries to crush Luffy, Zoro, and Viola between the walls. In the manga, that's where that scene cuts off, right when the walls slam in on them. And it's kind of left as this cliffhanger. It's like, oh, what happened to the three of them? And we don't actually get to see them again till like 2 or 3 more chapters later. And we never saw how they broke out, but the anime does show us that Luffy uses Gomu Gomu no Fusen and then uses Gomu Gomu no Storm, which is something we haven't seen him use since Thriller Bark, if my memory serves me, which is kind of cool, actually. But then also, we see in that same scene, the anime show Zoro actually declaring to Luffy that he will take on Pika and defeat him, and then tells Luffy and Viola to go on. In the manga, this scene is kind of implied to have happened off-screen, as the next time we do see them, Luffy and Viola are already leaving Zoro, with Viola asking Luffy if Zoro is really going to be okay by himself. And then finally, the other big change that I wanted to mention is in that same scene, or after that scene, following that one, Kinemon and Wicca are seen getting lost due to Pika rearranging the castle with his powers. This is all completely added filler. Like I mentioned, we don't see Kinemon for quite some time. And it also kind of ruins the surprise reveal of Kinemon's new disguise. Because this is such a good joke, and it's so funny when it actually does happen, and it kind of sucks that we already know. Because I mean, how can you not tell with that silhouette? They try and hide it behind the puff of smoke, but I mean, you know who he's disguising himself as when you see the frilly feather boa scarf on him, and it's just like, really, you're gonna ruin that surprise? Now, of course, there are a lot of other smaller changes, and many of the scenes have been rearranged as well, mostly for just flow and stuff, but also kind of perplexing ones as well. But yeah, those I didn't really mention a lot of the smaller changes, but they're there, and it's so many, and it's kind of like tiring, especially, you know, when I was watching this in real time when it was being aired back in like I think it was like 2011. No, it was probably closer to 2014. You know, when these episodes aired, it was just like I didn't notice to the extent, like, you definitely felt the slow pacing, but when I actually like go through and actually compare and pick out every single change, it is exhausting how many scenes are just drawn out or added or just completely wasting time, and it really sucks. This is one of the arcs that I hope that they do something similar to what they did with Fishman Island when they took that 6-month break to kind of get through the latest arc and take a hiatus. Like, I hope that they actually go back and not only redo the animation, but fix this god-awful pacing because it is so bad. But anyways, enough of my ranting about that. Let's get into the episodes themselves. So to start, we begin with the introductions of the fighters remaining for the final round of the Corrida Colosseum Tournament and our formal introduction to Diamante. And like I mentioned in the differences section, his intro is complete with sort of this rock musical number, which is a reference to his inspiration, Steven Tyler, the lead singer of the rock band Aerosmith, right down to his moves and poses, which are very similar to Tyler. Additionally, we get a showcase of his devil fruit powers, which I may say is pretty lame, but it seems to be strong. He is in possession of the Hira Hira no Mi, or the Ripple Ripple fruit. Hira Hira is the Japanese onomatopoeia for like cloth or a flag flapping in the wind or rippling in the wind. It seems like he has the ability to turn things that are soft cloth or as hard as steel, allowing him to kind of manipulate cloth into all sorts of weapons and defensive items. This quite honestly is one of the weirdest fruits and one of the few that kind of doesn't make sense to me at all. Like, why would being a flagman give him the ability to harden it? It just made no sense to me, and it didn't even feel like that intimidating of a power, especially for the second in command of the Don Quixote family crew, I feel like. But it seems like power-wise, since Zoro got matched up with Pika, I guess Pika is the second. I don't know. It always felt like Diamante was the second in command, but who knows? Now, at least, that was made up by the reveal of Pika's power, which, I'll get into a little bit more when we get to that point. But yeah, Pika definitely offsets Diamante's sort of lameness, to be honest. The final round introduces these sort of larger fighting fish that we saw outside of the island underneath that bridge, the green bit. And they fill the surrounding moat now. And attached to one of their back is the Mera Mera fruit, which I always felt was kind of a risky place to put something so valuable. But Sabo smartly, rather than fighting the other gladiators, goes straight for luring out the fish with the fruit on its back. And after showing off what Burgess can do by blasting away a fighting fish, a good portion of the crowd gets blown away too, which is insane. But it sets up a showcase of just how strong Sabo is later. And we finally get to see the fish the Mera Mera fruit chest is chained to on its back make itself seen, which is the number 01 fish. And Sabo jumps on it first, and once again, Burgess goes for his signature elbow shockwave attack that we saw earlier. But this is where we get to see Sabo's fighting style and strength as he coats his hands with haki and unleashes a martial arts style called Dragon Claw and obliterates Burgess's armor. That is really hard to say. And it kind of makes you wonder if there's any connection to Dragon himself and if he taught him how to fight like this. So it'll be interesting to learn more about Sabo and the Revolutionary Army and Dragon once we get into that. But for now, we'll just kind of have to speculate. And now back to the hysterical shenanigans as the animal disguise trio along with Viola are sneaking around. And again, I cannot stop laughing at these guys literally just walking around dressed like that. It's made even funnier with Viola there to serve as kind of the straight woman to this gag. And sadly, this is the final scene with these costumes, but we get one last final moment as Viola is warning them they can't use this entrance as it could lead to alerting Pika. But before they can move on to the alternate route, Luffy has already disappeared and unleashed a Gear 3rd Gigant pistol out of his koi costume. And I love the startled reactions from the guards as they yell, "What the heck is that koi?" And then as he inflates, one of them just kind of offhandedly yells, "A blowfish?" Also, there's the money shot of Luffy launching the punch, and Oda draws it in a way where it almost looks like the fist is coming out of the mouth of the koi. I love after being shocked at what Luffy just did, Viola just kind of rolls with it. And when Luffy asks if he can take off the disguise, she just yells at him, "Do as you like." And right here, Viola gives off a very similar vibe to how Nami reacts to Luffy's crazy antics. And I love that we kind of still get that even without Nami being present. Now, of course, this alerts the whole palace, including Doflamingo, of Luffy's presence in the castle, which epically infuriates Doflamingo and no doubt is kind of shitting himself a little after realizing just how uninformed and miscalculated his plans are now. After repeatedly saying that he shouldn't underestimate Luffy, he made the mistake of doing just that. And now Luffy is on his doorstep racing to him. And now that they're inside the palace, we finally get to meet the final executive member of the Don Quixote family, the spade suit representative, Pika, who is in possession of probably one of the more stronger and cooler fruits, unlike Diamante. Pika owns the Ishi Shinomi, or the stone fruit. Ishi in Japanese is stone or rock. And he can also assimilate himself into the stone around him, but it doesn't seem like he himself can turn into stone without there being any stone near him, which I find is a little weird, but I guess if he could do that, then that would probably be more akin to a Logia fruit rather than a Paramecia, which he is confirmed to be a Paramecia user. It's really interesting that Oda decided to make the Ishishi fruit a Paramecia that only allows the user to control stone rather than actually become stone. But I guess maybe because stone itself isn't specifically an element and it is more solid, but your guess is as good as mine. It'll be interesting to see more Pika's fruit once we see it in action, but it is for sure a very formidable one so far, as it's been decided that Pika is Zoro's one-on-one opponent. This originally got me thinking how this arc will not be similar to past arcs, as half the Straw Hats are now missing as they went to Zou. So who will take on some of the other members of the Don Quixote family? And it's here I came to the realization at the time when I was reading it, that the reason why so many of these new characters were introduced in this arc was to serve as opponents for them, probably. Because while so far Pika, Senor Pink, Sugar, and Treble all have opponents set up for them, Diamante, Dellinger, Gladius, Baby 5, Laoji, and Buffalo all don't have Straw Hat opponents, and they likely never will, since they're all preoccupied with the other aforementioned opponents. So it became clear to me that the other gladiators like Bartolomeo and Cavendish got so much attention, as well as Sabo and the Revolutionary Army folks were introduced to take on some of those roles of fighting off some of the other Don Quixote members, which was actually a fun thought because it changes the formula quite a bit. And we'd get to see some really different fights because a lot of these people have very interesting and different fighting styles, different fruits, different powers. And obviously there are some stakes too, with Sabo probably getting the Mera Mera fruit and all of that. So I think for me, it was just really exciting, the prospect of seeing Bartolomeo actually get like a Straw Hat level 1v1 fight. And because I was convinced that Bartolomeo was gonna join the crew at that point because of how crazy of a fan he was. And so I thought that Bartolomeo would definitely get a huge one-on-one battle with who I wasn't really sure yet, but yeah, I was getting really excited to potentially see Bartolomeo join the crew. At least that's what my thought was back then. Now, catching back up with what's happening in the factory, we see that Treble and Sugar get to Cavendish and turn him into a toy slave as well, in addition to many of the other gladiators we met earlier in the arc. And just outside the executive tower, we catch up with Usopp and Robin, as well as Leo and the Tontara army. We learn their plan is amazingly very similar to Usopp's Tabasco star, and just a far more intense version disguised as Sugar's favorite snack, a grape. And when I first saw this, originally I immediately thought, oh, I see now. This is how Usopp is going to come through, and something is going to go wrong, and he's going to have to be the one to basically take that grape and shoot it into her mouth somehow. But boy, I was not expecting how this was actually going to play out. Oda knows us really well, and basically he planted this thought in all of our minds and then managed to defy expectations, because he sets us up and then does something infinitely more fun than anything we could have dreamt up. But yeah. And then we get a smaller scene with the toy soldier getting stopped by Lao Ji, like I mentioned. And this scene, we'll talk a little bit more about the toy soldier in the next set of episodes. But yeah, we do get to kind of see the setup for the toy soldier and how he'll get past Lao Ji. Yeah, in closing, while this set of episodes had an incessantly overwhelming amount of filler, there are still some great moments, however, as we move further into the closing sections of the second act of Dressrosa, and we'll finally get all the pieces in place for the climactic third act brawl to begin. So yeah, definitely, it is still exciting for sure. But yeah, it's the anime pacing really does kind of drag it down a bit. But anyways, if you did enjoy this, send me a like or comment. And if you want to join me on this journey of rewatching One Piece, please consider subscribing. Check out my Instagram at SunnyGo Podcast for updates when I post new episodes and to see some pictures of my manga collection or card collection. And as always, just listening to the podcast is enough for me. But if you feel like extra supporting me, feel free to check out my Buy Me a Coffee profile. And as always, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to listen to my podcast. Stay safe out there, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Bye.